Most aviation enthusiasts are familiar with an airline's fleet of aircraft. For example, we know that EasyJet is an Airbus-only fleet with almost 350 active A320 family airframes in use. Jet2 are currently in the long process of transitioning from an all-Boeing fleet to Airbus A321neo aircraft. Ryanair are of course known for their huge fleet of 737NG and MAX aircraft. So in this video, I'm going to cover off some unique aircraft that UK airlines have once used for their operations, whether that be on just a temporary basis or an actual airframe that was employed over a longer term. Let's start with our channel favourite airline, Jet2.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday.
In February of 2003, Channel Express commenced Jet2 operations with just a few 737-300 aircraft. Some years later, the Boeing 757-200 was introduced, with these aircraft at the time still being relatively young, with Boeing only delivering the last 757 a couple of years before Jet2 had introduced them. Which is crazy to think of now, of course, with the last one departing Manchester finally in January 2025, spelling the end to over 40 years of the type's operation in the UK. Nowadays they have a huge fleet of both 737-800s, A321neos, and they often lease air tanker A330s. There are even some remaining 737-300s in the fleet, which operate solely from Leeds Bradford, although these aircraft were not procured from Channel Express and are a lot younger. So, in 2007, Jet2 actually leased a quadjet, an Avro RJ with a registration Golf Foxtrot Lima Tango Charlie from Flightline. This airline had previously flown for Flybe under the registration Golf Juliet Echo Bravo Hotel and was roughly 15 years old at the time of its service with Jet2. Now there's very little information on the type of operations this had with Jet2. The type wore a basic Jet2 livery, quite akin to some of the 737NGs that are often leased from Air Explore today for the airline. The route information that I have available for the type seems to suggest the aircraft operated from solely Manchester, performing domestic flights to London's Gatwick, Edinburgh, Newcastle, and sometimes international flights to Italy and Amsterdam. At some stage the livery was updated, advertising £26.99 flights from Gatwick to Newcastle or vice versa. According to Airfleet's data, the jet did just 8 weeks with Jet2. I'm not sure how accurate this is, however, considering that Flightline owned the aircraft from January 2005, perhaps it was only officially registered as a lease with Jet2 several years on. At this time, I think Jet2 had a fairly non-standard cabin anyway, even on their owned fleet, so I'm not sure how far they would have gone in terms of updating the cabin inside the baby quadjet, perhaps just some Jet2 advertisement on the bulkheads. No Jess Glynn though, that's for sure. The Avro met its fate when Flightline ceased operations in December 2008, where the aircraft was later scrapped. Okay, so we've mentioned EasyJet already in this video, but their fleet wasn't always Airbus. They also had a fairly humble start back in the 1990s with a fleet of 737 classic aircraft, with a total of 56 737-300s and a couple of 737-200s. It appeared they would continue to support Boeing, with the airline bringing the 737-700 into the fleet. A total of 33 of these aircraft were onboarded. We now know, of course, that this wouldn't be the case, as the airline migrated for an all-Airbus A320 family fleet. Well, funnily enough, EasyJet actually didn't leave Boeing entirely. Despite the last 737-700 flight operating in 2011, the airline had previously leased 4 Boeing 757-200s in 2010. 2 of these aircraft were leased for only 8 weeks, whereas the 2 others were active from June 2010 over to September and October 2010. Likely to keep up with the demand over the British school holidays. One aircraft, Golf Zulu Alpha Papa X-Ray, was later returned to EasyJet for 1 month in 2014 to once again support with the busier summer routes from August to September. Despite these short lease times, the aircraft were given almost full liveries, in line with EasyJet's branding policy. Once again, I have no idea what the interior of these leased aircraft looked like. One aircraft was leased from Astras, 2 from Air Finland, and of course the last one from Titan Airways. Golf Zulu Alpha Papa X-Ray was actually purchased by Jet2 just last year to be scrapped and used for spare parts to keep the final workhorses in their fleet going to their retirement as we headed into 2025. The last registered 757 for Jet2 was Golf Lima Sierra Alpha Oscar. Now this next airline technically isn't registered in the United Kingdom, but it serves a huge amount of it, so I'm going to include it in this video. Most of you will be aware of Ryanair's humble start, offering BAC 111 aircraft, ATR 42s and some Embraer 110s in the late 80s and earlier 90s. In 1994, the airline procured 21 737-200 airliners, which as many of you also know was sold and replaced by the 737-800. However, during this transitional period, did you know that Ryanair employed the 737 Classic series, with both the Dash 300 and longer 400 making an appearance? Due to this type being leased, there is very little information on them, and unlike the last two examples, the livery chosen was either non-standard or simply not applied at all. Speaking of the 737, remember when I mentioned Jet2's humble beginning with the Dash 300s? Well, they actually leased a Dash 200 back in 2007. This aircraft, registration Golf Charlie Echo Alpha Hotel, was first delivered in 1975, making it 32 years old when it was pressed into service with Jet2 as a lease from European Air Charter. The aircraft was put into service on the 1st of August 2007. From the limited data I have, the aircraft seemed to be based in Manchester, performing relatively normal Jet2 based routes. LS154 as an example, on the 8th of August 2007 from Ibiza back to Manchester. The aircraft was withdrawn from service by the end of 2008 after less than 4 months with Jet2. It's now on permanent display in Bournemouth Aviation Museum. EasyJet, Ryanair and Jet2 of course all still exist, so as a last example, let's look into a now defunct airline. The demise of Thomas Cook is certainly a topic for another video, but their fleet during their last 10 years of operations consisted of Airbus A320 family aircraft, Boeing 757s, 767s and the Airbus A330. But I'm actually missing something here. Thomas Cook in 2017, during what would be their last summer season, actually leased a Boeing 737-300 from Bull Air. Now, despite the short lease time, they did actually decide to apply a livery, although I'm not exactly sure who applied this. Surely there's a better placement for that text. I'm not sure why this sort of stuff interests me. It's kind of one of those things where I wish I could have been there to experience these different types for the airlines. I do feel like the face of aviation in the UK has changed, where fleets have become more simplified and standardised to give airlines redundancy and save costs by operating less types of aircraft. Airlines leasing aircraft is still very much a live practice today, although when you look at UK airlines, the typical lease is for a 737 or an A320 family aircraft. Some examples of rarer aircraft still being used for UK-based flights would be the privilege-style 777 operating some flights for TUI, or potentially Jet2 using the World to Fly Portugal's A330-300 back in 2023. Now at the start of this video I mentioned I'll include some examples of aircraft that were actually owned by airlines and are considered unique rather than just leased types. I'll start with Thomson, which of course became TUI. Thomson at one stage operated the Boeing 767-200, although this type was sold well off before the larger Dash 300 retired in 2023. Two particular examples, Golf Bravo Yankee Alpha Alpha and Golf Bravo Yankee Alpha Bravo, were allegedly fitted with engines intended for the 767-300, giving them considerable more performance and a favourite among pilots. Personally, I love the look of the Dash 200, and seeing the old liveries on these aircraft really reminds me of airport trips when I was young. It's fairly likely I'd film one at some stage. Monarch Airlines' DC-10 operations is another great example of a UK airline using a unique aircraft, where the aircraft Golf Delta Mike Charlie Alpha was operated from 1996 into 2001 by the airline. This classic airliner can still be found at Manchester Airport, albeit with newer Monarch titles. If you want to know more about this aircraft, I'd highly recommend watching Expo Aviation's video on it. It's a full presentation on the airline's decisions behind operating the type, with some real insider information on the type and its subsequent retirement. Before I end this video, I'd like to give a short message about this video's production. Now, we've looked at aircraft usage in the 1990s, the 2000s and some of the 2010s. Funnily enough, I was either not alive or I was simply too young to be at the airport snapping pictures or taking footage of the aircraft to be used in this video when these aircraft were still in use. Whilst I've spent several evenings creating and editing this video, ultimately some of the content in this video is not mine, yet without it, we simply couldn't illustrate the stories of these airlines and aircraft. If you've watched this far, I'd really appreciate you checking the description, where I've offered full credit for any images or videos used that are not my own, at least where the author's actually known. I've done my best in most places. In fact, this video here, which was actually taken on board an EasyJet A319 or A320, is one of the oldest pieces of useful video footage I have, from around 2011 on a flight back from Jersey. Some of you may even recognise this footage, which was actually taken from one of my earlier flight simulation videos on a now gone YouTube channel, where I create some content on some of the incidents a Jet2 737-300 was involved in. If you enjoyed this short video, please leave some feedback in the comments below, and I'd also love to hear your memories aboard UK Airlines, on their since retired or decommissioned aircraft. I'd be happy to make another video going into some more detail on particular airframes or just cover different countries' use of unique aircraft over the years. We shall see you in the next one.